Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of For What It's Nerd. Today we're discussing The Rings of Power, which released 2 days ago now. With me, I have Chloe, who is a good friend of mine for a lot of years. Hey Chloe, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm doing very well, thank you, and super excited to be here.
Good. I'm really glad to have you because we were discussing. Like, I actually had to put out kind of a call for Lord of the Rings fans this time round, right? Because I was like, I have friends who I know who like Lord of the Rings, but I don't have a distinct like that's a Lord of the Rings person I would go to. Well, I do now because it's you, but like, there you go. But like, I didn't have someone to kind of go. You know, with for example, Marvel, I have a few people I can go, right, okay, that's a person I want to discuss this with, but not so much with Lord of the Rings. So I put out a call. You were like, hey, what's this about? And I was like, this, and you were like, yes. And I have to say, we were just talking about this off camera before we started, but Chloe has been like going like nuts, like watched the first episode twice, watched the second episode, then researching genealogies for this. Like I just want to clarify for like I am, as a Lord of the Rings fan, I like Lord of the Rings. I have not read the books. I've read passages because at university I did a course on like Norse mythology, and obviously the link over there is very important. So like we looked at kind of the Hobbit a little bit, but like especially in regards to Beowulf. Anyway, I'm going off track. So I am not a big Lord of the Rings person, like in terms of like I like it, I will consume media around it, but I haven't got fully into it yet, if that makes sense. But you've read all the books, right?
Well, I haven't read all.
Well,
Like I haven't heard the entire history of Middle Earth. There's like
right.
13 books last I heard.
Oh.
Those are the books published by Christopher Tolkien, so Tolkien's son, after his death. So there are a gazillion books essentially that have been published by Christopher Tolkien over 2 years.
Yeah.
And so I've read some of them, not all of them, because I mean, when I say the whole history of Middle Earth, there's 13 books, and some of them are poetry, like. There's a couple of books. There's a couple of books like the Lay of Leithian, that is the Song of Beren and Luthien, which is entirely written in verse. And there's like two versions of it because Tolkien never actually finished it. He got halfway through, decided it wasn't good enough, so he reread it and got even less halfway through the second time. It took him longer.
That's like, isn't that just a perfect analogy for how we do things, though? Like, that is like perfect. I love that. That's brilliant. I love that. But yeah, so like I said,
I have not read all the books. I have read quite a few of the books.
Right.
And so some of them a few years ago, some of them in French, but
you're decent. So you're a lot more read up than me. That's just what I want to confirm ahead of going into this. Because like I need someone to sort of not handhold me. That's a bit extreme. Like I know what, like for example, The Rings of Power. I watched the 2 episodes. I know what was going on, right? But I think one thing that I think was anomalous within the episodes actually was like, obviously no one's going to shout, hey, we're like 500 years before this thing or whatever. But like I feel like it was very like time was very not addressed, if that makes sense. Like you get the beginning part in episode 1 where you've got the discussion about Morgoth and they're dealing with Morgoth, and but that was kind of relatively quickly brushed over. I get why, because you can't sit there for a whole episode kind of discussing just like hey, this is the history,
and they don't have the rights to it actually.
Oh, right.
So don't necessarily quote me on this because this is just from what I've hearsay. I haven't looked into it in detail, but apparently Amazon has the rights to the Lord of the Rings, so the trilogy, the Hobbit, and the appendixes to these books. They do not have the rights to the Silmarillion. So the Silmarillion being the essentially like the Bible equivalent to the Tolkien universe.
The kind of world building book, right?
The kind of world building books. Yeah. They do not have the rights to that. They do not have the rights to the histories of Middle Earth.
Right.
So
that's kind of why they've had to. Right.
So they've had to summarize a lot, and so they can't actually go into much detail.
Right. See, that's good to know.
Yeah. And I think that considering this little bit of information, they actually did a pretty remarkable job.
Right.
Of summarizing the first age and touching on like the big touchstones. So you see Valinor, you see the two trees, you see the so I think they're allowed to tell you that Morgoth destroyed the two trees, but I can't tell you that it was actually an ally of Morgoth, the spider Ungoliant, who went and poisoned the two trees. So they can tell you it was Morgoth, they can't tell you the details that actually Morgoth was a friend of his. I mean, a friend of his. I mean,
I think yeah, no, I know what you mean, but I think what it you know, with that information in mind, like looking at it again, like trying to, you know, I think they did do a good job of like kind of just getting people into it. I think just for someone like me, I was like, oh, you know, where exactly are we? You know what I mean? Just a little bit more than maybe the typical audience viewer would be. But with that in mind, I can't really fault it at that point. They did a really good job of setting it up. If they have that kind of, they could only use, like you say, the appendices of the books.
And even from my point of view, I think they did a good job because, like in they summarized maybe 3,000 years of history in 5 minutes, and they still managed to hit, and they still managed to hit. Like they showed Valinor, which they showed the
it
trees,
looks gorgeous, by the way.
And then they showed that scene where it's such a tiny detail. You see it for like a fraction of a second, but they showed that scene where you have all the elves drawing their swords, and in my head I'm like, oh my god, that is the Oath of Fëanor. And it's I mean, the characters are not right because Finrod wouldn't have been there. Galadriel's brother, he wouldn't have been in this scene.
Right.
But just the visual of all the elves drawing their swords, even the angle of the camera is reminiscent of like a few very well-known artworks, like fan arts.
Right. Okay. Wow.
So just seeing that on screen, that moment, they're all drawing their swords, like that is the.
It was very like.
It's absolutely iconic. They nailed the visual. They absolutely nailed the visual.
Yeah, but I think that's true of like both of these episodes, to be honest. Like, just as a kind of quick overview of that, like the visual. I mean, you know, stunning. Like, there's a lot of cityscapes like panning in this, isn't there? You know, you pan across a lot of cities. Yeah. You've got, like you say, Valinor, and you've got is it Linden? The whole. And then you've got the crafter city. I forget what it's called exactly.
I'm an embarrassment to my title of expert guest, whatever, because I also forget the name. There's a gazillion names in Tolkien. Sometimes people have a gazillion names, and I am bad with names.
Well, so the city where Serembor person, that's where he was, but then also Khazad-dûm as well, which looked amazing. Like, and what I think is great about this, I think the CGI was very top notch. Like when you were watching it, those cityscapes felt very believable. Like, for example, if you watch something like Thor Ragnarok, for example, or Thor just generally, like yes, does Asgard look great? Yes, but you can tell it's CGI. And I'm not saying that I'm not saying that you can't tell that this is CGI because you know it's CGI in this. But I think just the way it's done allows you to forget for just a second that it's CGI, and then you kind of remember. But it's like
it works.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. It works for the cities. There was 1 or 2 points where I thought, I mean, the CGI is amazing, but there was 1 or 2 points here and there where I thought it's too big.
Right.
For example, that scene in the very beginning of episode 1 where you see the elves along with Galadriel climbing that wall of ice.
Yes.
Right. Too big. Yeah. Essentially, you see the camera pan in, and when I finally saw the size of the people, of the elves, compared to the size of the place, I mean, there was a fraction of a second where like, oh my god, it's huge, and then it threw me off because it was too huge. Like the perspective shift was.
Yeah.
So I think in that spot was just a tiny bit too much.
Yeah.
But otherwise, it's pretty glorious.
Yeah, I think just the colors were so vibrant as well, right? Like I think you look like it's like anytime there was water. I know that sounds very weird to say, but anytime there was water, it just looked absolutely amazing. Like just all this kind of Wow.
It does. That scene in episode 2 in Durin Stronghold with when they're
Yes.
just sat at dinner and there's a reflection from the water. Oh my god, that was gorgeous. I like specifically
Looked absolutely amazing.
Oh god, there's so many points in these 2 episodes where I wanted to pause and like draw it.
Yes.
I'm like, no, I have to finish watching the episodes. I have to be like,
I have to be ready for the podcast. But no, it was great, and I think costume design was also, because sometimes with costume design you get like kind of a cheap imitation, but I think when you're looking at the elf armor, and like not just because there's not just one, there's a million different types of elf armors in this, but like then even the dwarf helmets, they looked amazing, like actually really great. I was very interested in, like, is it Arondir, the guy who's in the Southlands with Bronwyn? That's right, isn't it? Yeah. But his chest piece, the one with the like, it looked like an ent to me. Is that right, or is that wrong?
I'm not actually quite sure. It looks like tooled leather of some sort. Yeah. I'm not sure I could recognize what was on the armor.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of. I was arguing with a friend earlier this morning. Apparently Arondir's.
I love the start of that. I was arguing with a friend.
Look, I was just hanging out in one of the Discord voice chats, and someone popped in that I knew had seen the episodes, and so we had a discussion. Had to nerd out about it, so
Well, it's good because the thing is, then you've come in with another perspective, which is brilliant.
Absolutely. See, I did my homework.
But carry on.
Yes, apparently around there is a wood elf, not a high elf. I'm not actually sure about that. I mean, elven politics. It's elves. It gets elves. It gets complicated. But I was. But I mean, when I'm trying to figure out who's represented on his armor, it might be relevant, But I'm actually I have no idea. So that was a lot of words. That was a lot of words to play. That's in the end of the day, I have no idea.
But that's okay. I mean, that's very Lord of the Rings in general, right? I think a lot of us go. I mean, for me at least, I'm like, hey, that person connects to that, but really, I don't know what's happening here. But no, I mean, the one scene that I thought looked really nice, both armor wise and visual wise, was when Gilgalad, is that right?
Gilgalad is the High King.
Yeah, the High King. Yeah. Yes. When he's like giving all the wreaths to the elves, that looked stunning. Like their armor, his robes, like Elrond, like it all looked pristine, like very well done. And it was very like, oh wow,
but like, not pristine, but not so pristine that it looks fake, because it's been a thing in a couple of fantasy shows we've had over the past year. There's been like in the Wheel of Time show at one point there was a complaint that the costumes looked too clean, too. I didn't get that impression here.
Yeah, it needs to look slightly lived in, because I mean these are literally. I mean, yes, it might be ceremonial armor, but ceremonial armor isn't sterile. It's not.
Absolutely.
It doesn't just sit there in perpetuity doing nothing. Like it moves, and it has like some kind of. You might have like a few nicks here and there or something like that, just to kind of give a sense of. But no, it was really well done.
One thing. One thing that I find impressive, that is, it's maybe it's such a small detail, but on the topic of the costumes, I think they worked some actual magic in making Galadriel look so good in what is essentially a nitro. There are so many scenes.
Yes. No, you're right.
Even when she, like in the very beginning, with the young child actress.
Yes.
And later on, I mean, there are a few points throughout the thing where Galadriel is wearing what is essentially like a nitro or a potato sack.
Yeah.
It looks like it's formless and shapeless.
It's literally just nothing.
And she looks absolutely glorious in it.
Yeah.
Like I don't know. Sometimes it's the lights from behind her, and there's just kind of transparency to the outfits. So there's that see-through quality to it, but it's. Yeah. I mean, it's not indecent or anyway. In any way.
No. It's very.
It's ethereal in a way. And
Yeah.
that thing is like a night robe. How does she look so good in a night robe?
Yeah.
So,
But actually, that
Yeah.
do you know what? It's funny you're saying that, because I thought one of the most visually stunning or like interesting scenes was when they were removing the armor. Like the very, very
yes.
very like it was very what's the word, metaphorical, obviously, for them going back to Valinor, right? But like the removal of it was very like, you felt like you just intruded on a ritual almost. Like it was very like the tension was
Absolutely.
right, and it was and especially when Galadriel kind of almost interrupts that when she keeps hold of her like dagger. Yeah, like not let go. No. But it's really good. It was really good.
You feel there's a ceremonial. You feel the ceremonial. It's a ritual, and you also feel that Galadriel is not in it.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
feel the
She's
tension. You
definitely
feel the awkwardness.
But she's trying to as well, which is very interesting. Like she's really trying to do what Elrond's asked her to do, but she's like, I can't. Sorry, guys. And she's, but like, what I did like, and one thing one concern I did have at the end of episode 1, going into episode 2, kind of whilst we're on that, is that like when she jumped off the boat, I was like, oh, she's just going to end up on land at the beginning of the 2nd episode. I really thought it was just going to be like, something that they cut away from, right? Because like, I mean, shows have done that before. Shows have just been like, and this happened. But the fact that they then took the 2nd episode to literally just have her at sea for a whole episode, that was very bold of a move. Because
it's very bold, and it's also interesting because I think, of course, I could be wrong, but I think she's going to end up in Numenor.
Right.
Which is this. I mean, when you look at the map, it's a whole. I mean, she can't swim this.
Yeah.
Like this whole thing. We're talking about the distance that is almost like Europe to the US.
Yes.
Like, right.
Yeah.
There's a whole entire ocean. There's a whole entire ocean right here. Like it's not a small swim.
Yeah.
But somewhere in the middle of that, there's the huge island of Numenor.
Right.
And so geographically, it would make sense.
Yeah.
That's at the very end of the 2nd episode, you see that she's going to get picked up.
Yeah.
And I think that might be the Numenorians, but I'm not actually sure about that because again, they don't have the rights.
Yeah.
So geographically, it would make sense.
Yeah.
For her to be picked up by a Numenorian ship. But I have no idea what role Numenor is going to play in the series.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, isn't it? It's like you say, it's very hard if you suddenly haven't got the rights to half of the universe. It's like very hard to do certain things with that. So it'll definitely be a kind of a situation of like.
They've already casted. I think they already cast a few of the Numenorian kings. I think.
Right. Well, that's interesting.
I've not done my homework in terms of like the actual show and the casting and it, but again, I mean my homework.
Do you know what the funny thing is, though? Is that I did no homework. I am coming in here. Essentially, I've watched the 2 episodes. I have watched Lord of the Rings previously, and I have watched The Hobbit previously. Like, I've watched those. Yeah. I've actually had a few.
I have not.
The Hobbit ridiculous. No, I get it.
Let's not go there.
But so like one thing that I found interesting that a few people were saying, and this is what it's kind of continuing on from that, is that Galadriel's story and this is very different to how she had been portrayed in the books prior, right? So this is a very different take on Galadriel. Do you like that or do you dislike it?
I don't mind it.
Right.
I guess I'm warming up to it. Like there's nothing about this. There's nothing about this that shocks me in the sense like no, I don't like this. No,
right. It's kind of it's just fine. Different. Yeah.
It's fine. It's different. It's fine. I certainly don't mind seeing a female character being put forward.
Agreed.
Because I mean, I love Tolkien. Most people here watching this thing are going to love Tolkien. So we all love Tolkien. But dude was from a century ago. And
there was like 5 female characters in his books in total.
Basically, there's like exactly. So if you don't have the rights, to the Silmarillion, and you can't tell the story of Luthien being an absolute total badass, pardon my French, then you kind of have to Right.
Yeah, you have to
So
do something else. Yeah.
Them putting Galadriel forward, I like it.
Yeah.
Her being a warrior, like an actual physical, like
Yes.
sword wielding, armor wearing,
Yeah.
snorting warrior. I can get behind that. It's a younger version. It's a younger version of
Well, that's the
Galadriel.
thing.
So
Yeah.
it can work.
It's still got Galadriel in it, though, hasn't it? Like, when you, like, for example, if you watch I mean, obviously, again, I've only watched the Lord of the Rings movies, so I have to pull from that. But when I watch Kate Blanchett play Galadriel, and now I watch this actress, sadly, I don't know her name, yikes. I see, even in terms of the casting, similarities. So I think they, and the kind of like, even when she's like determined and like kind of frustrated, she's not. She's still got that majesty about her, if you know what I mean. And I think that's what sells me as it still being Galadriel, despite her being a sword wielding badass. To pardon my French. You were going to say something there though, because you got really excited. So tell me what you were going to say.
No, it's a tangent. It's less about
Who cares? Go.
There's a couple of moments. There's a couple of moments that I really really liked. Seeing Galadriel interact with her squad, her team, her men.
Yeah.
Essentially, there's a couple of moments where you see the tension and you have a feeling that something's going to get ugly. Like when they are when they are walking in a blizzard and someone at the tail end of the group can't walk anymore, and you see her like her turning and march towards them, and you're like, okay, someone's going to get. But what she does is take off her cloak and wrap the person. Yeah. So there's that moment, and there's also the moment later on after the fight with the troll, where her second draws up his sword. And there's another moment where you have this feeling of like, oh damn, this is going to get ugly. Yeah. Because they're refusing to go further on. Yeah. And it's like there's an actual sword being drawn, and suddenly there are more swords being drawn. Yeah. But then what they do is they lay the swords down. Yeah. And those two moments just gave me the impression that the elves are so civilized in a way. Yes. Even when they're frustrated with something, they're doing it in such a way. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Even like there's another part where you're right as well. Galadriel, when she almost wants to refuse the wreath again. She's like got this moment of like, and then she does it eventually, like for like civility and for like tradition's sake, etc. She just kind of she accepts it, right? Yeah. But like, so I agree. They did a very good job of selling the elves as elves. And I think a lot of fantasy doesn't do that, right? Like a lot of fantasy just goes, hey, they have pointy ears, and then they just act like anyone else. And it's like, elves need to be different. Like elves are meant to be this kind of like regal, like, you know, not always, but like for a large part, they're meant to be like, they're meant to be different. And I think they very much sold the elves as not other in a sense of like totally other, but as other enough to be like, okay, we're in a different place right now. And I think they managed to nail. I mean, that's something that's a bit difficult maybe to get right, because again, they don't have the rights to the whole thing. Yes. Because when you read the Silmarillion, the first age, the elves are absolute savages. Like I'm saying this, but I mean they're savages not in the sense of
not barbarism.
Not barbarism, but I mean there are assholes again. Sorry, Feanor, who is the most crafty craftsman that has ever crafted. Right. Among the elves. You hear his great grandson mention him, like, what have I achieved? Feanor almost managed to turn Morgoth. Yeah. So Feanor was an absolutely horrible person. He was.
Just the way you said it, though. Oh.
I'm not actually sure what level of profanity you have on your YouTube channel, and I tend to swear a lot. So like I'm trying right here.
No, don't worry about it. Really, like
So-
I mean, if you've for those unaware, I have a gaming channel and I have this podcast channel. My gaming channel. If you watch a video, if you watch any of those videos within the first 30 seconds, I will have sworn at least 10 times. Maybe exaggeration,
Alright.
but I
Alright,
am
so-
fine with it. So go ahead, say he's an asshat. Say he's a
Okay.
this. He's a that. Do it.
Fëanor,
Go ahead.
Fëanor is a fucking asshole. I mean, literally the first time that elves draw swords against other elves, it's Fëanor's fault. Like,
Right. Okay. He's that type of
did a
guy.
few-
Yeah.
Yeah, he's that type of guy. Dude did a few very, very, very shitty things.
Mhm.
Like he,
Right.
when his precious jewels, the Silmarils, were stolen, and he decided to go after Morgoth.
Uh-huh.
He needed ships. He didn't have ships. He needed
Right.
ships, and there was a faction of elves that had ships. And when he wanted them, the elves said, "Yeah, no, we're not giving you ships. Just, I mean, these are our ships."
Yeah. Yeah.
So he attacked them and killed a lot of them.
Oh.
And took the ships, traveled to Middle Earth,
Uh-huh.
and then when his family was like, okay, so now we can send the ships to get the rest of our like to get like the cousins and the uncles,
Right,
etc., who
yeah.
had their own armies who were about to join, and Fëanor was like, no, fuck them. So he burned the ships.
What? What? Why?
Dude was an
Oh.
absolute asshole. Dude was absolutely sure that he was gonna get this thing done. It was gonna be a quick thing, you know. So he didn't need anyone. He just needed himself and his 7 sons. Which, by the way, I mean, when I said like the oath of Fëanor at the beginning, the drawing of the swords, it was Fëanor and his 7 sons who swore an oath to. I don't remember the exact phrasing, but they would basically not know rest until they had recovered the Silmarils from anyone
Right.
that held them, be that Morgoth or anyone else.
Right. Okay.
And so Fëanor, as soon as they arrived to Middle Earth, he burned the ships, he went after Morgoth, and he basically immediately got himself killed. And then he left his 7 sons to continue the war that he started for the next several centuries.
Oh, what an
All
asshole!
of this. He was. I mean, dude was the absolute craftiest, most
Yeah.
magnificent craftsman to have ever magnificent. And
Yeah.
anyway, the guy was a genius, but he was also a moron and an asshole.
Oh, I love it.
Which
That's
is,
brilliant.
I mean, it's absolutely brilliant. And
You've
so,
got to have characters like
so
that
yeah,
sometimes, though.
So the first kinslaying was Fëanor's fault. Like,
Right.
literally Fëanor being an idiot.
Uh-huh.
And then afterwards, like centuries later, when the elves eventually recovered the Silmarils, it wasn't the sons of Fëanor who recovered them. And so, because of the oath that they swore in front of the mightiest powers, again, they couldn't not follow their oath. So there was a second kinslaying, and then a third kinslaying.
Oh.
So, the elves.
I do think, though, it's funny you say that.
Yeah.
I do think, even despite obviously, like I say, they can't use that. I do think there's an inspiration of that in Galadriel's character. It's not about the Silmarils, is it? Yeah.
No, it's not about the Silmarils anymore. But Galadriel was part of it. Galadriel was part of the kinslaying.
Right.
Sort of. I mean, it's all she's like a cousin or something to Fëanor and his
Right.
and his kids. So I think she didn't actually kill anyone in the first kinslaying just because she arrived late, essentially. So,
Oh, sorry guys, I didn't kill anyone. I was late.
no, but look, there were a faction of elves, and like Fëanor and his sons started it.
Right.
And then the second host of the elves, so Fëanor's cousins, they arrived there, and they saw that people were already fighting, and they didn't stop and ask questions to ask like who
Just
started it.
slashing.
They saw that their cousins were getting attacked, so they started slashing. You know, exactly.
That's brilliant. I love it.
So-
but yeah. So
But
I
think
yeah.
something they did right, I think, was that the feeling I get is that this is the second age. It's all of the kinslayings and whatnot happened during the first age, and there was a lot of strife and a lot of pain and a lot of drama and just a lot of tragedy around it. But by the second age, most of Feanor's sons are gone. Feanor himself is long dead. The Silmarils have been recovered or irrevocably lost.
Yeah.
But the elves are still carrying all of that tragedy.
Yes.
Because they won the war. Eventually they had help, but they eventually won the war against Morgoth. But how much did that cost them, you know?
Yeah.
And there are hints of that savagery. They are capable of a lot of violence. And I mean, they can do a lot of damage, these elves.
Yeah.
But also I think that they also don't want to. And this is the impression that I got from Galadriel and her men. There's the potential, you feel the tension, you feel that potential for violence, but you also feel the restraints. And I think the restraints can be said to be can be a result of all of that strife.
Yeah.
They don't want to do this again.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
but
that was really well.
I think it's almost kind of like, obviously with that context, like taking that in and looking at this through that light now, it's almost kind of like Galadriel's the one that's kind of trying to not force them back into that, but it's what Gil-galad actually says. He says something about this. He says, you know, the fact she might fan the flames, you know, the same wind that can extinguish a flame can reignite it. And I think that's very like, that's obviously the heart can't say it, but that's very much that, isn't it? I think it's a reference to what's come before. Now that you say that, it seems almost obvious to me. But that's very interesting. I mean, I had kind of thought, why is like, because I mean obviously everyone denies, I mean especially in the kind of the world that we have today, everyone denies that there's actually a problem if they can, right? But I did wonder why Gil-galad was so ready to like just deny it. Like he seemed very like, but I mean if you think about it, right, your people have been at war for centuries, you know, and you can finally decree peace. Like you're going to want to, right? Even if it is for a bit. Like I think you would. Like I think anyone would.
And there's also something you might consider when you're looking at the elves and their interactions with each other is how old each of them is, because it's not always obvious when you look at them. It's not always obvious when you look at them, but Galadriel is actually a lot older than Gil-galad.
Right.
He's either her nephew or her grandnephew, depending on the version, because Tolkien rewrote a few things.
Right. Yeah.
But so he is quite a bit younger than her, and he might. Okay, I'm not actually sure about that bit, but I think he might have been born in Middle Earth, whereas Galadriel was born in Valinor. So Galadriel, when she tells you, like when Elrond is talking about the light of the trees and just like about sailing into the west and feeling the light, and Galadriel tells you that's all I ever knew when I was a child. She was there. She saw the trees. Yeah. In the Silmarillion, in general, in Tolkien's writing, there's always a strong distinction that is made between the people who were in Valinor during the time of the trees, so literally before the sun and the moon. Like Galadriel is literally older than the sun and moon, which is a little mindfuck, but you know what? So never mind.
Whatever. Let's just go with it.
There's this distinction being made between the people who were there, who saw the trees, and who like basically carried that memory for the rest of their lives. And the people who were born after, or who were born on Middle Earth and who never traveled to Valinor, and who never saw the trees. So you have this distinction. And by the time of the Second Age, I think Galadriel is one of the very few remaining. And basically, they all died during the First Age, or the few that didn't die went back to Valinor.
Right. Yeah. She's the one of the few that are still around in Middle Earth. So she's one of the few that's still around, and she's one of the few by that point. I mean, I don't think Gil-galad actually fought all that much in the First Age. Right. Okay. So he's very shielded from it, really. He might be actually. I might be talking. I might be. I'm not talking out of your ass. About that. I'm not actually very sure about when Gil-galad was born and how old he is, but he's definitely younger than she is. Right. Okay. Well, that's interesting. Well, that makes more sense though, because I think even it adds even more context to it. Because you think, like, if he isn't aware of these certain things or isn't as, you know, Galadriel talk. I mean, it's a different conversation with a different person, but it makes the more sense to kind of compare it to when Galadriel's talking to that. What was his name? The guy on the boat, the human, I forget his name, Halbrand or something like that.
Yes.
Yeah. So she says to him, I like in my life I've seen more people die than you could take. I'm sorry, I could recite more names to you than would it take you to live. That's how many people I know that have died. And I think that's a very good analogy of like just the situation in general. She's dealt with so much compared to a lot of people around her. And so that kind of drives her.
Absolutely, but even though she seems a lot younger, and we see, and she's a young Galadriel compared to the Galadriel we saw in the movie.
Yes,
she's still old as the stones.
Yeah.
Like she is old. She's seen stuff.
Well, yeah. Well, the comparison from Galadriel in this to Galadriel in the movies is actually probably lesser than Galadriel to Galadriel from being born, right?
Not necessarily. No.
Right. Okay.
I think we're seeing her like still in the first half of her life.
Right. Okay.
But it's a very, very, very long life.
Very, very long life.
Like to get you another measure of how old she is. Galadriel has a grandfather.
Right.
She doesn't have a great grandfather. Like her grandfather was literally the first elf.
Oh,
one of the first elves, you know?
That's brilliant.
She is that old.
Gosh.
So yeah, and so so effectively when Gil-galad said she might fan the flames, he's talking about someone who has been through all of the wars of the First Age, but also the several kinslayings.
Yeah. Yeah.
So and she is one of the few, like all of Feanor's sons who were the worst, who were the worst of it because of the oath.
Yeah.
So all of Feanor's sons are gone by then. One tiny detail: one of them actually raised Elrond.
Right.
After they killed his parents. Yeah. Sorry.
The elves are pretty out there.
Not killed. Okay, they didn't kill his parents, if I remember correctly. They drove his parents off, but the way they drove them off, they couldn't come back. He had a third brother. I mean, he had two brothers. One is twin.
Right.
And I think the third brother was killed.
Right. Gosh.
But eventually, So
for people who are undying, I mean, I know they can die by injury, unnatural causes. For people who are undying, they die a lot.
They die a lot.
I know it's the idea of they live for as long as and then
Yeah, they die a lot, but they die a lot by each other as well. I mean, there's a lot of But anyway, all of this to say that Galadriel is one of the few that remains that was there throughout all of the entire First Age and through the several kinslayings as well. Yeah, like it's her family, it's her ancestors, it's her cousins, her brothers, etc. that did all of this stuff. I mean, Finrod still was an absolute sweetheart, but still. Yeah.
But it means that even though centuries have passed or whatever, these are very close deaths to her. You know what I mean? Like you're saying,
these are very close,
or like tragedies, etc.
And I don't think she's an innocent in them. Like
no, probably not.
The first kinslaying she didn't think. Actually, okay, now I remember. The first kinslaying she took part on the other side, essentially. Right. So Galadriel, so you have several families of high elves, several people. Yes. So you have the Noldor who are the high elves in Middle Earth, who are the craftsmen. So Feanor's people, but Feanor also had two half brothers, Fingolfin and Finarfin. Right. So these are the Noldor. So they're one nation of high elves. But you had another nation, the Teleri, and those are the ones who made the ships. Right. And Galadriel's mother was a Teleri. Right. And her father was a Noldor, so she was considered she was considered a Noldor, but her mother was Teleri. Right. And actually, during the first kinslaying, which was Feanor and the Noldor attacking the Teleri for their ships, Galadriel actually took part, but she picked up her sword, and actually I think that's a mention of her in the books with the sword. I would have to check that, but I think that's actually a mention of her in the books with an actual sword. Yeah. But she fought for the Teleri against her family. Right, against the Noldor. I don't have my hard copy version of the.
Don't worry. I think we can go just maybe slightly off hearsay, considering. Let's just put it this way, right? We're talking about on a podcast about a show that is derivative of a movie that is derivative of a book. I think we're okay to be slightly off kilter. I think just slightly.
I get into details. Okay?
No, it's okay. That's not me. That's not me complaining. That's not anything like that. I'm just saying you are okay to be slightly wrong.
It's okay. All right, but I mean, even if she took part on the right side, she still took part in the kinslaying, like
in the thing itself.
Kinslaying.
Yes,
the kinslaying. Like nobody had ever, no elf had ever like took up a weapon against another elf. That was the first time, literally.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, Gil-galad has good reasons. Gil-galad has good reasons to be a bit wary of her.
Yeah. Especially because, like, I mean, even within the show itself, it's built in that she's not listening to him. She's like, "Fuck you, Gil-galad. I'm going to go and keep doing what I'm doing." And like, he's pretty gracious about that, considering, like, he doesn't give her any kind of censure. Like, he doesn't he just says, "You're not going back out. Sorry." Like, that's not. And even frames that as a prize because she's going back to Valinor as far as he's concerned. But no, so I think we've kind of discussed Galadriel a good bit there. What do you think of the Elrond / Durin stuff? What do you think of that? I think that was quite interesting.
It was great. It was great. Elrond's actor, whose name I should know, but Elrond's actor is absolutely amazing. The guy is so absolutely expressive.
Yes.
Like he has. And you can really see Elrond, the politician, Elrond, the envoy, Elrond, the negotiator, and Elrond, the wordsmith.
Yeah.
I mean, you see him writing Gil-galad's speech, and I was like, he wrote Gil-galad's speech, like during the. Did you catch that?
No. What?
When you first see Elrond in episode 1.
Right.
He sat in a tree and he's writing something.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
He's actually writing the speech that Gil-galad gave during the ceremony. That was Elrond writing it.
Hey, that's great. I didn't realize that. No, I thought he was just like writing any old crap that wasn't relevant. Like, no. But he did give it off to someone though, didn't he? I do remember that because I remember him giving that. Yeah. So.
And then you have a scene of Gil-galad saying the speech, and Elrond is like. He's like silently reciting.
I didn't get that bit. I didn't get it, but because like Galadriel was watching him speaking, it wasn't she or something like. I didn't catch. I thought it was him. Like just like I thought it was like a cool bantering moment between him and Galadriel, but I didn't realize it was actually him mouthing the speech. That's even better. That's amazing.
It is a bantering moment because she notices him doing it.
Yes, well, yeah, but you know, I thought it was more like just in between them. But that's attention to detail like that is great because that. I mean, obviously you watched the second episode twice, so you watched it one more time than me. But I was thoroughly engrossed. So I think I missed stuff like that a little bit, especially because I'm not it's not hard to pick up that someone's writing a speech and then passing it off to someone.
No, but I was watching for it. I was watching for the details.
But that's really cool. I didn't realize that. I didn't realize that at all. That's really cool. But speaking of that conversation, because that was something that kind of passed me by, maybe you can illuminate it slightly. When that woman comes to Elrond and says to him, "You're not invited to this, or you can't come to this meeting, or whatever." What is that about? Because it says about elven something or other.
Elrond is a half elf.
Right, I thought as much, but I wasn't 100%. Right, okay.
Yeah, well, technically speaking, it's a bit more complicated than that, but but he's considered a half elf.
Right.
And he's in. I mean, I think he's in a bit of an awkward situation at Gil-galad's court. And obviously he's a person of some rank.
Yes.
But also, I mean, Gil-galad is from the side of the Noldor that drove off Elrond's parents.
Right.
He's technically from that side of the family, right?
Nice.
So I think he's descended. No, he's not descended from Feanor. He is not descended from Feanor, but he's from one of Feanor's half brothers, I think.
Right.
I can't remember which one of the two. Anyway, but the Noldor essentially drove off. So Feanor's sons drove off Elrond's parents and destroyed the city they were in and killed one of his brothers. But Elrond and Elros, so Elrond and his twin, were so young. So one of these guys, Maglor, so the second son of Feanor, took them in and raised them.
Okay.
And eventually, I think they were passed on to dwell in the court of the High King.
Right.
But they are orphans. Their parents have been driven away. Their inheritance has been basically lost. And I mean, it's not like it's not that they're being fostered at the court of an enemy, but it's not that. There is a lot of love there. So it's not. But it is an awkward situation. Plus he's not completely elf.
Right.
And there might be a hint of prejudice in there, I think.
Right. Okay.
So when they say elf lords only, they might mean only the royal house, or only the pure blooded Noldor, or only high elves, like full blooded high elves.
Right.
But there's something there.
There's something there. I find it interesting. I do think it's interesting though that what they've done is, and it speaks to a few other points, is that like they don't baby you through the story. And I do like that. I think you can perceive that this world has lived and has existed. I mean, not just the fact that we're told that Morgoth does this, that, and the other, and there's these things that happened. You've got like. Elrond is a good example of this generally. Like when he says she's here, and like it's like him and Galadriel obviously have this very extensive prior relationship, like prior friendship, but also him and Durin have the same thing, right? Like that was a very, I mean, it was an important part of the episode, but we didn't. I don't know the backstory of that, but like that moment where they're on the elevator. And like there's a lot of perceived tension between them, but even though we don't know the exact full details of like their friendship before, that scene is still very, very interesting to watch because it reminds you about elves and how they are set apart from your human or your dwarf or your etc.
Just because of how long they live.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that scene really made me love Elrond because he was. Right. He was very, I want to say very human, but he's not. But I mean,
no, but I know what you mean. He had a humanistic approach to the situation. Yeah,
humane, maybe kind of the best. Like he had a very gentle, a very kind, a very empathetic, a very empathetic way of reacting there. Like he didn't get angry. He didn't get defensive. He immediately got to. When he saw how angry Durin was, when he figured out, okay, he was a bit slow at figuring it out, but when he did figure out what was going on, he didn't get defensive, he didn't get angry, he just the fact that he didn't even say immediately, I'm sorry, he said congratulations.
Yes, it's that thing again of like...
It was beautifully done.
It was very like you said, it was humane or kind of like that kind of approach, but like the way he did it was elven. Like I could almost imagine like it's because congratulations is even quite formal. If you think about it, like congratulations is like kind of a formal. How do I put it? What's the word? Like I don't know how to describe it. It's something you'd write almost in a like it's a word you use in a letter, or it's something you'd use, if you were like sending someone an email about that. I know it sounds very weird to say email in the same sentence as Elrond, but you know what I mean. It's like it's not like. But also, it's very like cordial. I mean, yes, well, that's true.
They have been friends. They have like. They have known each other for like half a century, like Durin says. But it's who they are. I mean, Elrond is essentially a prince, even if for everyone it's complicated, and there's always going to be that level. There's always going to be that layers to their interactions. They are
because
friends.
there needs to
They've
be.
been
Yeah,
friends. They were friends. I mean, before the 20-year gap, they were friends. They were
yeah,
like brothers. But also, they are who they are,
yes,
and who they
exactly. Yeah,
are diplomats and leaders of their respective people,
yeah,
and there are layers,
yeah. I
and
mean,
you can feel those, and you can feel those layers.
yeah, yeah. And I found it quite interesting. I think dwarf culture was really done well in this because it wasn't loads. It wasn't thrown in your face, like there wasn't like tankets of meat everywhere or anything stupid like that. But it was just like literally there was these people all stood in a room. And then, like, they're all kind of like. First of all, their appearances looked amazing. Like, some had like the metal ears, and some had like other stuff. It was like crazy. But then the competition that they actually do, like, it's so dwarf, but it's like it just feels. It feels like you are again every time you go into when you're in Linden, when you're in Khazad-dûm, you've got these senses of like these places are distinct. These places aren't just like, because I mean, like I say, again, a lot of fantasy, yes, they have different appearances for, their elves, their dwarves, their whatever else. The cultures kind of sort of seem to just kind of all of a sudden kind of like mess into a big ball of like, they have nothing interesting about them type thing. And I think, obviously, I mean, Tolkien has a good setting point anyway, because he was the first, essentially, to kind of do it in this way, like with the dwarves and the elves, etc., and so on. But, like, I think Amazon is, and the directors behind this have definitely pulled that and just went, we're going to make sure that this feels like you're in a different place when you're in Khazad-dûm versus Linden versus the Southlands. Like even like the Southlands, I actually found very interesting because the accents. Now I know that's a very weird thing to say, but the accents was a really good way of doing it because that kind of almost I can't name the accent, but very very English, like kind of accent. I can't place it, which is really bad because I'm from England. Yikes! But like
I'm French, so I'm not going to.
I'm French. I don't know. Yeah, but it was very interesting, and on certain words, it was very like, that you get this sense of like you're in a different place versus like the highly pronounced Elven way of speaking, like the kind of like distinct pronunciation, and then like
it's also the expressions like
yes.
Like having some, you have sandstone in your granite.
Yes.
Or just having.
Yes, that was a great one.
We're the ones wielding the long side of the hammer. These sort of.
It makes you feel.
But you get what they mean.
And there's an implied history there as well. Go ahead.
I'm not going to have time to talk about them, but the hobbits.
Let's move on to the half-woods. Let's do it now. Let's do it now. Let's move on to the half-woods. We'll do it now. Let's do it. Let's do it.
Amazing. Like they're amazing.
Very,
you were talking about accents and cultures and whatnot, and oh my god, they are so distinct. They are so. Yes. They are perfect.
Well, what I find very interesting. Yeah, what I find very interesting about them is that despite you can tell they're proto-hobbits, like you said, they're kind of like hobbits before hobbits type thing. But like the way they've done them makes them feel very distinct to hobbits, even though they have a very similar kind of let's not interfere with the world type thing, but they feel distinct in their own way because of like what the first scene you're introduced to them and their house, their stuff just pops up. Amazing, very fun. I loved it. I thought it was great.
And you can see how one grows into the other.
Yes.
At this point in time, apparently they're nomadic.
Yeah, they seem to be traveling.
They seem to be traveling. So, and eventually they will settle down. They will settle down and build their houses and not move again much.
Yeah.
But it seems like they're. Oh my god, the visuals in this! Like I could go on and on. It's amazing how well they were done and how well they fit together. Yeah. They have a whole mix of ethnicities and they all fit together perfectly. It's amazing. Yeah.
I think outfit has a lot to do with that, right? Like the outfits were really fun. I mean, it's Poppy and Nori, right? The main two girls. But their outfits, I mean, they're just so much detailing on it to make it look very, it's eclectic. It feels not nomadic in the sense of like when you hear nomad the first time, you think very like desert kind of vibes, right? But this is obviously very much the opposite of that. It does feel nomadic still. It does feel nomadic. Everything they're wearing kind of feels very. I mean, even for example, when she says, "Oh, our lanterns, they're made with like fireflies."
Fireflies.
Like just little things like that. It's like brilliant. It's like
it's amazing, and it's also it's just there's a quality to it. I don't know if it's makeup or if it's outfit or if it's but like the elves and even men to an extent are pretty.
Yes. Yeah.
Like what's her name? Bronwyn?
Bronwyn, yeah.
Yes.
The one from the village, yeah.
Yes, the healer.
Yes.
She's more weathered than the elves, but she's still pretty, like conventionally pretty.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The hobbits, none of them have that conventional Hollywood style pretty quality to them. And every single time I saw them on screen, I wanted to pause and draw them because they are so amazingly expressive.
There's a lot of character there.
There's so much character. They are amazing. I mean, they were it's not conventional aesthetics, but oh my god, they are beautiful.
Yeah,
it's
exactly. Well, it comes back to the idea of culture, right? It shows culture as something other. It shows the idea that we have 4 storylines in this, right? We have your storyline where you've got the dwarves, you've got the elves, you've got the humans, and you've got the halflets, right? You've got these 4 different kind of, for want of a better word, like races, which isn't true because in certain places you've got elves still, and etc. But you've got these 4 different races with their different storylines, and yet and they all feel, even though they're connected and they're all starting to connect, especially by the end of the 2nd episode, they're like they all feel distinct. You feel you don't get confused about where you are. Like, yes, you might not remember the name. Like the Southlands, I wasn't quite picking up. I know it sounds stupid because it's a very easy name, but it wasn't coming into my head as quickly. But like you knew where you were when you were in the Southlands versus when you were in Khazad-dûm versus when you were in, because every place looks different. I think a lot.
Even among the elves, I think we haven't seen much of Eregion.
Right.
That's the city of the craftsmen.
Oh,
so we haven't seen much of Eregion, but I think it's going to look like the little bits we've seen. It's going to look very different from Lindon.
Probably, you'd like to think so, because it needs to be distinct. Yeah. Because everything you do in a show like this is when you've got so many moving pieces. I mean, how many characters that are main characters in this? You've got Elrond, you've got Galadriel, you've got Arendar. I keep forgetting his name. Is Arendir. You've got Bronwyn and her son Theo, who has that sword, by the way. Who has that sword?
That's absolutely not going to be drama. Nope. Everything will be fine.
And then you've got Durin, who I don't know if he's going to be a main character or more kind of like a recurring character, but still. And then you've got like you've got the halffoot, so you've got Nori, and you've got kind of Poppy. She's a decent bit there. But then also you've got the stranger.
Probably Gandalf.
Do you think?
I mean, I'm not sure because lore-wise, book-wise, he doesn't show up until the Third Age.
Right.
So he's not supposed to. So he's not supposed to be here by now. None of the Istari are supposed to be here by now.
Right.
But I mean, who else is going to show up in a meteorite?
Yeah.
Plus, there are small hints.
Right.
Gandalf always had a strong relationship with hobbits.
Right.
For one, and for another, the fireflies. You see him whispering. You see him whispering to the fireflies, and that should be reminiscent to the scene in the Lord of the Rings when he's stuck on Saruman's tower. And how does he get out? He whispers to a moth to carry a message for him.
Right.
Do you remember this?
Yeah. Yes, I do. Now that you said it. Now that you've said it, it's coming back. Yeah.
So I don't know.
So you do think it's Gandalf then? Do you think?
I think it's Gandalf. I think it's
it
Gandalf.
Kind of has to be, right? It looks very Gandalf. Like,
I mean, who is going to show up in a meteorite?
Yeah,
it's not going to be an elf. Yeah, it can't be an elf. Can't be a man. And if it's a Maiar, so one of the higher order of beings.
Right. Yeah.
So if it's a Maiar, I mean, it's gonna be one of the Istari, so the five wizards.
Right. Yeah.
Unless they're completely making stuff up that we haven't seen before.
Well, that's the thing. That's the thing you never know for certain, do you? Because the thing is, when you're dealing with an adaptation, yes. I mean, for example, The Witcher does this a lot. The Witcher season 2 started very similar-ish to the books, and then by the end, it was just wasn't comparable to the books at all. Like so out there, it's like they've changed the story so much. Like season 1 was very comparable. Season 2 just went bam. Let's just like throw this book out the window. Which was very bad. I didn't quite like it. How do I do it? I appreciate what the show was, but I didn't like that they just kind of went to the source material, you know? But I think that's the thing. One very real thing when you're dealing with this is that like you can very much just kind of go, they can throw it out the window at any point. They can go, we like it up to here, and then scrap the rest. You know what I mean? But no, I do think I thought it did smack of Gandalf, but like I was just kind of interested to see if there was any other potentials that it could be, because I think. I thought when I was watching it, I thought, is it? Because like it could be a very easy subversion, like if you wanted to. But I don't think. I think they're probably doing it. I think they're probably doing it because I mean everyone would want Gandalf, right?
I mean, it's either Gandalf or Saruman or Radagast.
Yeah,
or the
true.
other two. I think there were 5 Istari, and the other 2 are like twins or something, and we don't see them.
Right. Oh, interesting.
I think when I say Radagast, I think we only saw him in the Hobbit movies. Like I can't remember if he's in the books.
Yeah.
We get their names at one point. We get their names. Like there's Saruman, there's Gandalf, who is the grey, Radagast the brown, and the other 2 are blues, I think.
Right.
But we never see them, so we never really see them. We don't know what they're doing. I mean, it could be one of them. But I can't imagine that it's not one of the 5 wizards.
No, yeah. I mean, it does make sense. It seems from that he's very much that kind of character, so to speak.
I mean, who is going to show up in a meteorite?
Yeah, I mean that was very visually stunning scene, by the way, when it went through all the.
It can't be Sauron. It's not right. I mean, Sauron is of the same race.
Yeah.
As Gandalf, as Radagast, etc. So they're all Maiar.
Yeah.
And at one point, Sauron does take on human, elven form and interact. But at that point in the story, Sauron, if we see him, is going to be pretty.
I think, interestingly enough, I do think, speaking on that, this is like pulling from a memory. I do think that there was a character that we haven't seen yet that was shown. It was like a few stills from the show. I do think there was this character who people were kind of supposing, oh, it's this kind of mysterious, like you say, elven kind of character. Could that be? And so maybe that's where we'll see Sauron down the line. But yeah, no, I think it's personally Gandalf. But whether or not they change that, or whether or not they do something weird with it, who knows? But no, I'm very
No, go ahead, please.
I didn't know what you were going to say. I'm very happy with the show so far. I think it's very it sounds weird to say this after we've just gushed gushed over it for an hour, but I think it was a very good opening, but it's a very I think the stuff is just starting to happen at the end of season. The end of episode 2 is when things are just starting to happen. I think very much episode 1, episode 2 were a lot of setting, which is not bad, but I think
sort of.
I think you're starting to. I mean, things are starting to get bad. Like what I was saying, when Theo bleeds on the sword, and the sword just. And now things are getting bad. Like that was that was the turn. Well, I mean, apart from the fact that there was orc that comes up shooting up from that was a menacing scene, by the way. Really well done. I loved it. Very fun. Very fun. I loved it.
Bronwyn just slamming that orc's head on the table.
Yes. Yeah. It was like, why? Because it's interesting, right? Because I think the thing is, what I hate this trope in shows because it happens quite often. I know it's to build tension, especially because when you have like 10 episodes to complete, you have to have some kind of disbelief. But when characters are disbelieved constantly, it is so draining. So it was so nice for her to just go, fuck you, and just bam, there you go, there's your proof, there's your fucking proof. That was very, very good. But no, one thing I will say, I'm more invested as of yet in the characters that have already been. I mean, this is obviously natural, but the characters who have already been established. You know, Galadriel, Elrond, somewhat Durin, like those characters, right? Like, I think I'm more interested in them at the moment. But I do think that the characters who we've got, aside from that, especially the Half-Foots, like you say, have a very interesting dynamic, and I do think that they're going to build it to something that everyone will be like, these characters are great. I don't think there's anything that.
We're gonna have a bit of an issue with that, actually. I mean, depending. I mean, we are going to have a bit of an issue, but depending on how far they're planning to take the series in terms of like in-universe timeline. Yeah. Humans, hobbits, and dwarves, they don't last that long compared to elves.
That is true. That's true. I mean, you're going to have to basically have it over. You can't really go much more than what. If you do too big of a time skip, most of these characters are dead.
Yes, so we're going to have at some point. At some point, this is going to be an issue. I think. I mean, they have 5 seasons planned.
Right.
And 5 seasons, and there's like 2,000 years in the Second Age.
Right.
I mean, there's actually more than 2,000 years. There's let me check. I had a reference for this thing. There's like 3,500 years total. Right. But if they're now starting to forge the rings, they're already like a good third of the way in. Right. So you have about 2,000 years of history until they get to the last alliance of elves and men, which is where Lord of the Rings picks up, like the intro to the Lord of the Rings.
The fight with Sauron.
Yeah. So if they, there are many fights with Sauron, but like the last one.
You know what I mean? Yeah. I know. You knew what I meant. You knew what I meant.
Yes, I did.
You just had to be pedantic.
Isn't that what you have me here? Come on.
Yes, true.
I'm supposed to be.
You're my fact checker. Fact checker. I can speak. But no. So I mean, the only thing that I can think of them doing, very similar to what you've just said in terms of they've kind of pushed the kind of Gandalf thing early. Is they might kind of like stipend it into kind of basically being, yes, in terms of what Tolkien did, it was over, thousands of years or whatever, but maybe in terms of what they do for the show, it's actually kind of smushed. It might be like, maybe. 20 years or something, I don't know.
It would be interesting if they actually try to stretch it out. I mean, they have 5 seasons, so then maybe there's time. And I mean, there's areas where you can smush it together, and there's areas where you can't, because
just can't.
Like Numenor, for instance. Numenor is a big part. I mean, I have no idea how much they're going to show it, but I think they will show it, because from a tiny hint at the end of like episode 2, I really think it's Galadriel is being picked up by a guy from Numenor,
right?
Like a ship from Numenor. So I think they're going to show Numenor, and Numenor. The passage of time on Numenor is relevant. Numenor is human, is the line of human kings,
right?
And the fact that they fear death, that they resent that they don't live forever, etc., is very relevant to eventually to the stuff that happens to them.
Right. Okay. So it needs to kind of play out type thing.
And the succession of kings and queens on Numenor is relevant. Like you can't condense that.
No.
So
what would be interesting? What I was going to say is what would be interesting is if, I mean, for example, I don't watch Game of Thrones, but I know that House of the Dragon at the moment, for example, they are halfway through the season, removing the children characters, and they're bringing in adult versions of the actors to time skip, basically. I think what could be interesting is if they do 1 or 2 seasons with the characters that they have now, and do kind of what The Crown does this actually, which is a totally different type of show, but The Crown changes actors every 2 seasons. And what they do is they get a full set of new actors to play the roles. Now, obviously, I'm not saying that necessarily has to happen with Galadriel and, Elrond, because they're elves, right?
With the humans, for instance.
With the humans, you could do it that way.
Like we have... I knew her name 10 minutes ago.
Bronwyn? Is that who you mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, Bronwyn.
I was thinking, it's funny because even though you say that, I know for a fact that you know how we were saying about Tolkien only having a certain amount of female characters. There's still only like 4 in this show that are like main characters. Like,
Yes.
Bronwyn,
So
go on. Yes.
Bronwyn might age through the season, and then we won't see her again. And then maybe next season it's going to be her kid who's going to be all
Yes,
grown,
you never
maybe.
know. Yeah,
and also,
you never know.
I mean, this is also relevant because they're giving us a romance between an elf and a human.
Yes.
And the fact that humans don't last long is very, very relevant to that.
Yeah.
So,
That's
like it's gonna come up. It's going to come up.
It has to. Yeah.
And they put the emphasis on this with Durin as well, with Durin and Elrond.
Yeah.
Like I think this is going to be a recurring theme of the series.
Well, I mean, again,
old age. Well, yeah.
Galadriel and Halbrand had that conversation as well. Like I was saying about her having all these people. His life wouldn't last that long if she said all the names she knew. So there's definitely like the passage of time is very important in the show as a theme.
So I don't think they're going to condense.
Yeah,
I don't think they're going to condense.
I hope they don't. Yeah, I hope they don't. But the thing is, what you find with shows a lot of the time is they will set out to do one thing and then very much realize that they can't do that actually, and so plans change. I hope not, but I'd like to see something similar to like again, like I say, how The Crown does it, where they change actors after 2 seasons for certain key roles. Like I say, elves can stay pretty much the same, but you know, if you want to,
they'll have to change characters.
Yeah.
But yeah,
they'll have to. If they're dealing with something that's 20 years later, they're going to have to. It's as simple as that.
I mean, either they'll do a lot of work with makeup and CGI.
I was going to say. I was just about to say. Yeah.
I mean, over the course of the same season, maybe, but then afterwards, like from a season to another, you're going to see several generations of humans. I think it's going to have to be.
I think you have to at some point, just otherwise it's not going to work. But on overall, my general consensus, I'll go out there and say I was very impressed. Like for something that I'm not 100% into, I was like, oh wow, this is really interesting. All these characters that were kind of coming up, I didn't feel lost, and I think that's one thing that's very important. Despite all the stuff that's going on, you don't feel lost that much. You feel intrigued. You feel intrigued, which is a different thing. Because a lot of people will say, oh, well, why is he saying that? But nothing comes out of that. Well, it's because that's the world you're living in. You know, Lord of the Rings has always been expansive. You know, Hobbit, you know, Silmarillion, everything. I know, even not having read it, that it is expansive. There's a lot there. Just because, like, you can literally go on a wiki and look for 2 minutes and you're absolutely delving into the depths of, like, a million different characters that you just don't even know about. So like it's that kind of world. It's not like you're I'm not saying that Star Wars is a lot more, you know, plain, but like it's not like your Star Wars where you can go in and kind of relatively know Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, Chewbacca. You've got your characters and you're done, right? It's not like that. It's not like it's not like Marvel where you've got your Captain America, Iron Man done, like kind of thing. You've got a lot of characters that are like built around every other character, and there's a lot of things going on. So at that point, you're always going to be a little bit like inquisitive or curious or not 100% sure. And I think that's okay if you can sit in that unsurety and just enjoy it. You know, I think that's the main thing, right? Like if you can sit, you don't need to know the answer to every question. Because the thing is, Lord of the Rings, like you say, and like, again, Hobbit, etc., is so big. Is so big that you can't possibly know all of the law. I mean, some people will, but like you can't possibly know all of it off the top of your head, right? Like it would be near impossible. It would be near impossible, and that's okay. That's okay. And I think that's what this show does well, is that it just says, go with us. And it kind of goes back to actually our first point about the start. Just go with us. Like about the Morgoth, all that type of stuff. It actually does just say, we'll talk about 3,000 years of history or whatever, and then we'll just kind of dive in. We'll kind of dive in. But so that's my kind of
dive in and it works. They kind of dive in and it works, and you're able to follow the story and what's happening. Plus, also I mean, you have 2 episodes out of a series that's going to be 5 seasons long. Yes. So there is time. There's lots of time.
There's lots of time
to discover.
I don't even know how many episodes they're doing. Do you know how many episodes they're doing per season?
I think it's 8 or 10.
It's usually around there, isn't it? How many episodes?
Yeah.
I'm going to look this up quick. How many episodes in Rings of Power? And I knew I was going to talk about it because Google's given me a literal search of 2. Thanks, Google. Thanks, Google. I wasn't asking for literally really 8 episodes. 8 episodes. You're
8,
right.
yeah.
8.
So
we're a quarter in right to the first season right now. So 40 episodes we're going to get by the end.
The first season's out of 5 seasons. I mean, there's room.
I mean, that depends also if, for example, for season 2, they might say, actually, we want to expand to 10 episodes, for example. You never know. So minimum 40 at the moment, that type of thing. But so that's my kind of opinion. I'd say a solid 8. I think a solid 8. I think it's a really good show. I think there's like I said, there's a few bits where I'm unsure, so I think that tapers my enjoyment slightly, but it's my fault, not the show's, if you know what I mean. So that's why I'd give it an 8. Whereas, what do you think? What's your kind of final verdict, so to speak?
I think an 8 or a 9 as well. There's a few things that take me a bit out of it.
Yeah.
But they're less to do with how they chose to adapt the story and more to do with like actual cinematic things. Like for instance, I mentioned the CGI thing and stuff. Like sometimes it's too big and it takes me out of it.
And you're like, whoa,
there's a few small details like Finrod's speech to Galadriel about the ship and the light and whatnot. I mean, I found the metaphor was fun. But it's it's nothing to do with how they. I don't mind what they're doing with the story. I don't mind what they're doing with Galadriel. If the guy in the meteorites turns out to be Gandalf and he's 3,000 years too early, I don't mind.
Rather be 3,000 years early than late.
I don't mind all of the changes they've made so far, of which there have been a few. I don't mind them. I don't mind that we haven't seen Galadriel's husband so far, and where the hell is he?
Right.
I don't mind that. I don't mind. It's fine. You know, it's the tiny details of like. It's that metaphor was clumsy. Some of the CGI is a bit too big. It's like the romance between Arondir and Bronwyn seems a bit awkward so far.
Yeah, it was slightly forced. Do you think?
Slightly. I mean,
contrived.
Maybe I think it's because when you look at the Lord of the Rings, the movies and the books, they take forever to get anywhere. Like Tolkien takes his time. Tolkien takes his time to get started. You take forever to even leave the Shire, right?
Yes, yeah.
And so if you're expecting that sort of pace,
go elsewhere.
to be dropped immediately into this is a star-crossed romance and it's been going on. I mean, you don't see them meeting. You don't see them. You don't see. It's not like Aragorn and Arwen where they meet off screen, but like the idea of there's a romance. There's a romance between them is introduced slowly. It's like bang, you're there. The first scene with them, and you're already dropped into it. There's a romance, and everybody knows about it. It's like this.
Yeah.
So maybe it's because it's that fast, whereas everything else is slow, or you're expecting slow. Maybe it's a bit contrived. Maybe it's because Arondir is playing the very, very stoic elf.
Yes, that's true. Yeah,
so,
and doing it very well, actually.
He's doing it very well. But very, very stoic elf does not exactly scream romantic.
No, it's
to me. So
no.
So maybe it's just that they're both new characters, and so I don't have the weight of
Yes, yeah, exactly. It's different. It's different.
It could just be that. So
it might be time. It might simply be time.
It might just be time. So I don't really have much to be angry
to kind of gripe about it. Yeah. I'm the same. Like I say, it's very different. Like if we were sat here talking about, the next Star Wars show or something like that, I might be like, I don't like this, I don't like that. Not necessarily, because I try and be nice about things. I try and have. That's the whole point of this podcast, is to discuss things kind of on a level. Say, oh well, that wasn't that good, but this was, But like for Star Wars, where I'm more invested, I could see myself being a little bit more nitpicky. Whereas like when I'm giving something like Lord of the Rings, I just jump in and I go, let's see what happens, kind of thing.
I'm invested, but then again, maybe I just tend to be a good audience. Like it's like the Wheel of Time show that came up last year. I mean, I read all of these books when I was a kid. Right. It was basically, these were the books that taught me English, essentially. Because they had no translation and I wanted to read them. Yeah. So I am very invested in the Wheel of Time, and I was very invested in having a show, and I think a lot of people hated it. I didn't. I did not. I
Yeah.
enjoyed it.
Well,
They made a lot of changes.
Yeah.
They made a lot of changes to the story, and some of them I did not necessarily agree with, but I still enjoyed watching the show.
Well,
so I guess maybe I'm just.
You're just a good audience for it.
Audience.
Yeah,
I'm an easy audience.
But I think the thing is as well, because we're. I think, you know, when you're in a certain mindset about how stories unfold and how you deal with story and how you read story, or you understand that, like, for example, Tolkien himself revises stuff, right? So, or revised, he's dead, but you know what I mean? He revises stuff.
Yes,
so, I feel like nothing. A lot of people go like the whole route of this ruins this, and it doesn't. It doesn't, because what it does is it allows you an alternative, enjoyable experience, and then you can go either, I really like that, that's what I like, or you can go, I don't like that. But that's the whole point of this. That's the whole point of this discussion, because it's about us saying, you know, we can sit here and say, yeah, the show is great, and then you can say, I didn't like that CGI. Like that's okay. I think a lot. That's what I come back to every time when we do this podcast. That's the point. Is that, like, a lot of people just go bad or good, and that's it. That's it. They can't. They don't want to go beyond that. They want to just say this is crap, this is good, and that's it. And I hate that, because I think everything, to a degree. I'm not saying everything, because some things will be just bad, like just out and out bad or out and out good, right? But a lot of things have stuff that you can critique. Like, for example, I think everyone's pretty much hyped up. Again, I'm going to go back to Star Wars again because it's my easiest analogy. Everyone's hyped up for Andor right now, and I think Andor is going to be really fun. I think it's going to be great. I think it's going to visually it looks stunning. I think it's going to be a very interesting story. Now, if it comes to episode 3 and they do something I really hate, I'll still say that was bad. Like, I will still say that, because that's just who I am and what I want this podcast to be, right? And I think you're kind of equally willing to take stuff as it is. From what I'm hearing, is that you're equally willing to just take stuff as it is and then say whether you don't like it or not. I think that's the best way to be about these things, because, you know, at the end of the day, what's the point in... Imagine if we sat here for an hour today getting angry about Rings of Power. Like, what does that achieve? That
sounds exhausting, honestly.
Exactly. Yeah, it does. It really does. But there are people out there who are like that, and that's why I do this podcast, to kind of counteract that in my own little rebellious way. But honestly, I've really enjoyed this talk. Chloe, thank you so much for joining me. It's been amazing.
Thank you for having me. I've never done this before, and it was a lot less stressful than I expected.
It's a talk with a friend. That's what it is. Once you get into it, you forget the camera or anything like that, and you just talk about your enjoyments. And I really like that. I think that's what I really enjoy about this. But what I will say is, I would like to. Obviously, I don't know what plans will be at this very moment, but I would like to have you on again. Maybe when the season 1's finished or something like that. I would love to, depending on where things lie, etc. I would love to have you back on, and I'm really excited about more Rings of Power.
I would love to be here again, and I will. And anyway, even if I'm not here again, I know we're going to be talking about this.
Oh, we're definitely going to talk about it, regardless of whether you come on here or not. We're like, but anyway,
we're going to be talking about this.
Yeah, definitely, because there's a lot to discuss, and I'm very excited. Thank you so much, Chloe. Thank you so much, everyone who is listening / watching / wherever else you're consuming my media. I'm Peralta. This has been Chloe. Thank you, guys. I'll see you later.